Hello friends, welcome to a new topic today. In this chapter, we are going to learn about urinary casts. So, urinary casts are formed when protein and other organic matter solidify in the renal tubule. So, if the cast contains proteins, we call it as hyaline cast. If it contains red blood cells, we call it as red cell casts. If it contains leukocytes, then we call it as WBC casts. If it contains epithelial cells, we call it as epithelial casts. So if you see the clinical significance of different casts, so first we have hyaline casts. So these hyaline casts are the normal constituent of the urine. It is not attached with any significance. So this hyaline cast is mainly produced by Tamm-Hirschfeld protein. This Tamm-Hirschfeld protein is mainly excreted by the epithelial cells of loop of Henle. So this protein will secrete the hyaline casts. Next we have red blood cell casts. So these red blood cell casts are suggestive of glomerular injury. This shows glomerular injury. Then we have white blood cell casts. These white blood cells casts shows interstitial injury, which indicates interstitial nephritis. And this WBC cast, if it is associated with bacteria, it indicates pyelonephritis. Then it can include the broad granular casts. These broad granular casts are seen in chronic renal failure, and it indicates interstitial fibrosis and dilatation of tubules. Then we have pigmented or muddy or brown granular casts. What does these pigmented muddy granular casts indicate? So these will indicate nephrotoxic injury, that is acute tubular necrosis. Sometimes you will also see this presence of beta 2 microglobulin. This beta 2 microglobulin will indicate tubular injury, not the glomerular injury. It mainly indicates tubular injury. So this Tamm-Hirschfeld protein in urine is a feature of tubular proteinuria. Okay, next you will have to see there are two different types of proteinuria. This is the normal value. This is glomerular and tubular proteinuria. So if you see in the glomerular proteinuria, here the albumin to beta globulin ratio is usually normal in both glomerular and tubular proteinuria. It is not normal. What is important here is in glomerular and tubular proteinuria, albumin is to beta microglobulin ratio will be more than 1000:1. In glomerular proteinuria, it will be less than 10:1 in tubular proteinuria. So albumin is to beta to microglobulin ratio is more than 1000:1 in glomerular proteinuria and less than 10:1 in tubular proteinuria. Next important thing is color and appearance of urine. This is very important. See, red colored urine is seen in beetroot ingestion. Red colored urine is seen in beetroot ingestion, phenolphthalein in laxatives, vegetable dye ingestion, myoglobinuria, hemoglobinuria, Serratia marcescens bacteria can cause red diaper syndrome. So these are seen in red urine. Red urine is seen in beetroot ingestion or beta cyanine excretion, phenolphthalein in laxatives, vegetable dye ingestion, myoglobinuria, hemoglobinuria, Serratia marcescens bacteria can cause red diaper syndrome. Then we have reddish brown or brown colored urine, which is seen in nitrofurantoin, that is brown colored urine, L-dopa or alpha methyl dopa, metronidazole. All these causes reddish brown or brown colored urine. Then we have orange or yellow colored urine. Orange or yellow colored urine is seen in rifampicin, where we see yellow orange urine. Pyridium, orange urine is seen because of phenazopyridine. Pyridium, because of phenazopyridine, it produces orange colored urine. Then we have renal function tests. These renal function tests are mainly divided into three types. We have in the renal function test, we will have to estimate the Glomerular filtration rate. Glomerular filtration rate is estimated by creatinine clearance test and inulin clearance test. Inulin clearance test is used to assess the glomerular filtration rate. Then estimation of tubular function is by water deprivation test. This water deprivation test is used to assess the distal tubular function. Then estimation of renal plasma and renal plasma flow or renal blood flow. Renal plasma flow or blood flow by para aminohippuric acid clearance. So these are important renal function tests. Then we have one important thing which is called as renal papillary necrosis. Many questions have been asked on this. So renal papillary necrosis. What is renal papillary necrosis? This is mainly caused by ischemic necrosis and also sloughing of renal papillae. Because of ischemic necrosis and sloughing of renal papillae, you see this renal papillary necrosis. This renal papillary necrosis is clinically diagnosed by loin pain, hematuria and variable degree of renal impairment. It is characterized by loin pain, hematuria and variable degree of renal impairment. So what are the etiological factors? Renal papillary impairment, if you see, diabetes and analgesic use is the most common predisposing factors, but main causative factors are these, which include pyelonephritis, obstruction, sickle cell disease, tuberculosis, cirrhosis, analgesic abuse or alcohol, renal vein thrombosis and diabetes. So all these include renal papillary necrosis. What are they? Pyelonephritis, obstruction, sickle cell anemia, tuberculosis, cirrhosis, analgesic abuse or alcohol, renal vein thrombosis and diabetes. All these will cause renal papillary necrosis. Then one important thing is, so in this, if you see, we will have to see the differential diagnosis of nephritic syndromes based on the complement levels. These lists have been asked once. So what are the diseases which have low complement levels? Low complement levels are mainly immune complex type of glomerulonephritis, which include idiopathic proliferative glomerulonephritis, crycentric glomerulonephritis, membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, lupus nephritis, cryoglobulinemia, bacterial endocarditis, shunt nephritis, post-infectious glomerulonephritis or post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. And those drugs which have normal complement levels include anti-GBM disease like Goodpasture syndrome, pauci-immune glomerulonephritis like Wegener's granulomatosis, microscopic polyangiitis, immune complex mediated diseases like IgA nephropathy, Henox-Conlin purpura and fibrillary glomerulonephritis. So these are the diseases which have normal complement levels. If you see, there is one way which you can remember normal complement level disease. See, all the diseases of normal complement levels are one way or the other associated with vasculitis. See, Goodpasture syndrome is a type of vasculitis, right? Then pauci-immune glomerulonephritis, in this we have Wegener's glomerulonephritis and microscopic polyangiitis, polyarteritis nodosa. Both these are again vasculitis. Then in immune complex disease, IgA nephropathy, Henox-Conlin purpura is a vascular disease, right? You should just remember fibrillary glomerulonephritis and IgA nephropathy have normal complement levels. Rest all are obviously they are vasculitis. Then what are the causes of recurrent episodes of gross hematuria? Recurrent gross hematuria should be distinguished from isolated episodes of gross hematuria. So where do you see this recurrent gross hematuria? We can see recurrent gross hematuria in IgA nephropathy, Alport syndrome, thin glomerular basement membrane, hypercalciuria and urolithiasis. So recurrent gross hematuria we see IgA nephropathy, Alport syndrome, thin glomerular basement membrane, hypercalciuria and urolithiasis. In these conditions you see recurrent episodes of gross hematuria. Then What are the differential diagnoses for hematuria following respiratory infection? See, whenever there is hematuria following respiratory infection, okay, so this respiratory infection can be diagnosed as early as see, hematuria along with respiratory infection occurring less than 1 week, that is hematuria develops within 1 week of pharyngitis, then we call it as synpharyngitis hematuria. What is synpharyngitic hematuria? Here hematuria develops early after pharyngitis, that is less than 1 week of pharyngitis you get hematuria, that is synpharyngitic hematuria. Then we have delayed hematuria. In delayed hematuria, hematuria develops after pharyngitis with a delay of around at least 1 week of delay should be there, that is delayed hematuria. So in synpharyngitic hematuria, that is immediately after pharyngitis if hematuria develops, then you will have to see the primary renal manifestations, and this mainly is IgA nephropathy. In IgA nephropathy, pharyngitis and hematuria develops almost side by side. Here if you see, recurrences can occur in IgA nephropathy. C3 level is usually normal and ASO titers are normal in synpharyngitis hematuria or IgA nephropathy. In delayed hematuria, we have two things. One, we will have to see whether there are any systemic manifestations associated with renal disease. If there are any systemic manifestations associated with renal disease, like on the skin there can be rash or purpura, arthralgia, abdominal pain or nephritis. If these are there, then think of Henox-Conlin purpura. In this Henox-Conlin purpura, recurrences can occur and C3 levels and ASO titers are normal, okay, whereas in delayed hematuria with no systemic manifestations, only primary renal manifestations are seen. In this we see post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Okay, in post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, here recurrences are rare and C3 levels are depressed and ASO titers are elevated. So this is about hematuria following renal respiratory tract infection. So in this we have two types mainly. One, synpharyngitis, that is hematuria after 1 week of pharyngitis. Delayed, where after delayed, that is after 1 week of pharyngitis, hematuria developed. In synpharyngitis, the main differential diagnosis is IgA nephropathy. In delayed hematuria, we have Henox-Conlin purpura and post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. In this stage, we will have to see systemic disease. If delayed hematuria associated with systemic disease, then that is Henox-Conlin purpura. If delayed hematuria is not associated with systemic disease, then that is post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Then we will have to find the differentiating features between IgA nephropathy and post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, because both of them are associated with pharyngitis. So we should be able to differentiate between them. So IgA nephropathy is caused by synpharyngitis hematuria, that is the hematuria occurs after 2 to 4 days of pharyngitis. Because it occurs, there is no latent period between the pharyngitis and hematuria, we call it as synpharyngitis hematuria. Whereas in post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, it occurs after delayed hematuria, that is hematuria occurs after 1 to 3 weeks of pharyngitis or upper respiratory tract infection. Here there is significant latent period present between the hematuria and pharyngitis. So in IgA nephropathy, recurrences are common. Hematuria occurring in IgA nephropathy typically lasts for several days and then subsides, and it can recur after every few months, and as a result recurrences are common. Whereas in post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, recurrences are rare. That is, if you see complete recovery, recurrences are rare. Complete recovery occurs within 95% of patients of post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Then in IgA nephropathy, serum C3 levels are normal, whereas in post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, serum C3 levels are depressed in more than 90% of patients. Anti-streptolysin O titer is normal in IgA nephropathy. In post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis, IgA levels are elevated because obviously it is caused by streptococcal infection. So these are the important things. Thank you guys for watching my lecture. In the next class, we will learn about Goodpasture syndrome. Thank you.